Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This video is going to be my journey in finding the healer that's most fun. This is going back, or I wanted to go back to the roots of the channel in terms of playing every single healer, trying out every single healer, both in Mythic Plus, both in raids, trying the difference between them, making videos, comparisons, and all of those things. And I'm missing a couple of healers right now, and I decided to document this. And again, guys, if you enjoyed this series, and it might become a series if people want to see more and things like that, this is the roster that I currently have in terms of healers. Preservation Evoker is my main right now, at least in raids. It's the healer that I actually beat Mythic Saccharate with. It's almost 450 item level. It does not need to be geared. It's basically finished. It's just staying there. I've done a bunch of Mythic Plus, I've done a bunch of raids with it. So Preservation Evoker I'm finished with. Holy Paladin is 446 item level. This is basically a healer that I played a lot since the rework in terms of Mythic Plus, because it is extremely fun and powerful. It doesn't really need any more gearing. And my Resto Shaman is 443 item level, which is good enough right now because I did a lot of raids and Mythic Plus at the start of Season 2. So this leaves the remaining healers, and that includes Mistweaver Monk, Restoration Druid, and Priest. And this is how I geared these healers and my thoughts about these healers in Mythic Plus and raids. I might not cover all of them. I might leave some of them for part 2, because I don't want the video to be too long. So gearing right now, alts and things like that is relatively easy, and that is mainly to do with the fact that you have the catalyst. Again, the raid gearing is pretty easy because the raid difficulty is not that hard. And again, if you have a lot of time, you can really grind those Mythic Plus for those aspect crests and things like that in order to upgrade it. So if you want to really speed through gearing, the best way to do this, again, this is not going to work for everyone, but this is something that I did, is that even if you have a fresh character or something that's relatively low in terms of item level, below 400 item level, you can try and become the raid leader or make a PuG heroic Aberrus, because 9 times out of 10, even if you invite people who are extremely well geared, they won't mind the raid leader being lower item level, because again, no one wants to be a raid leader. No one wants to sort out the groups. It takes a while to build a group. You need to, again, get as many raid buffs as possible. You also have to replace people because people leave after each boss, and you might have to say a couple of things before each boss encounter in terms of the tactics. So no one wants to do that, and people are more than happy to allow an undergeared alt to handle this, and this is almost like a free boost. So I end up doing that because my friend ended up running a lot of these raids and he invited me, and I was able to gear up most of my characters through this way. Because most of the people were relatively high geared in the raid already, I was able to pick up pretty much 4 set on every single healer in terms of Mistweaver Monk, in terms of Priest, and in terms of Restoration Druid. And if you're lucky enough to kill Heroic Saccharate, because I do think Heroic Saccharate can actually pose a lot of problems, but if you're lucky enough to do a full heroic clear, you're also going to get that Master achievement for Season 2, which is going to give you another free token. So you can, again, fill the missing spots in terms of your tier, because you really want to get that 4 set. And on top of that, even if you don't get tier slots, any piece of gear that fits into the tier slot that you get from raid and things like that, you can catalyze using Creation Catalyst, and that is going to allow you to get that 4 set easier. So getting 4 set with a bit of luck in terms of, again, being the raid leader for especially heroic Aberrus can be one of the fastest way to do this. Honestly, it is insanely good. And on top of that, by doing a raid, you're most likely going to get a bunch of sparks of Shadow Flame. And there's a lot of people who came to my channel in YouTube comments and they're asking, I'm not sure how this crafting works. I haven't crafted since the Season 2. I don't understand the whole system. If you have not crafted any gear in this season, you've been missing out on the best loot in the game. Crafting in this game is cracked. It is insanely powerful, because pretty much at this point in the expansion, at this point in the season, you're gonna get a bunch of these sparks, and you'll basically be able to craft most of your gear using the system for item level 4 to 4 by using the base spark without having any of the crests. And I don't want to go too much into the system because it's just gonna go pure into gearing, but if you want to know more, or if you're really confused about this, really check out crafting, because you'll be able to get 4 to 4 gear on pretty much every piece. Again, you don't want to replace your 4 set bonus, but again, things like rings, weapons, wrists, waist, feet, neck, there's so many pieces that you'll be able to get to 4 to 4 with relatively no effort, and you won't need any loot from something like Mythic Plus, because you'll only need those crests to upgrade the items that you already crafted. So you can pretty much have your end game gear by just doing a heroic raid and then crafting all the pieces and then slowly throughout the game upgrading those pieces. And now the next step was to do hopefully plus 17 mythic plus. Now why plus 17? Because plus 17 will drop you gear that is able to be upgraded to 441, which again is really nice. On top of that, it drops you crests, and on top of that, it also fills in your vault. Most of the characters that you see on the screen were around 420 item level after I finished gearing. 420, 424, 425, around that level. And again, getting invited to a plus 17 or a plus 18 or plus 16 in terms of mythic plus is impossible without having any score, without having decent gear. So this is going to be one of those things where you have to either run your own key or ask your friends for help. On certain occasions, after a while of playing that looking for group Q, I did get invited into like an Underoath key, and again my Resto Druid was like 420 item level with not a lot of score, and it took a while to get invited, but this was one of those runs where you really want to forget. Honestly, it was pretty disastrous, but a lot of the times you're not going to have a perfect run, and at the end of the day everyone stuck around and they finished the key in order to fill the vault. Just an example, in terms of the last trash pack in Underoath has been an absolutely disaster when trying to do it on 45 keys, because you have to dodge, you know, tentacles, you have to dodge the frontal, and most of the time, as you can see in the video, most of the group will end up dying, and it's one of those things that I really don't like about Underoath. But again, I'm just digressing here. But at the end of the day, getting invited is going to be very hard. You might get invited to groups that are not going to be very successful, which again, it doesn't really matter, you just want that weekly vault filled in. But you probably will have to push your own keys. And this is we're going to the next section of the video, this is my overall impressions of the healers that I leveled so far in terms of rating, in terms of mythic plus. And I was extremely, and I mean extremely, surprised about which healer felt easy in these PuG keys, which healer felt different in raid situations. I was really disappointed by Restoration Druid. I don't know why. I had really high expectations for Resto Druid, but I mainly decided to level Resto Druid because of patch 10.17 changes with Grove Guardians. So right now I'm not playing with Grove Guardians because this is not patch 10.17. I was doing a lot of PuG dungeons, and in PuG dungeon environment it felt like a chore to a lot of extent, because, and I'm not saying it's because of the class itself, I'm also saying it because of the dungeons. The dungeons are extremely spiky. There's a lot of, especially in fortified keys, there's a lot of, how do you say, burst single damage happening, maybe not to the tank, but maybe to another party member. And you need to react to that, and in order to react to that as Resto Druid, you need to pre-hot. So most of the time I end up spending as a heal bot, just applying my hots and just anticipating damage, because I wanted to babysit the group. Because if I do end up going into cat form, which I love shape-shifting as Resto Druid, but if I do end up going into cat form and then someone takes damage, they can be dead within a span of 2 seconds. And that just felt really awkward to prepare for as Restoration Druid, on top of the fact that picking up Interrupt and using Interrupt was really awkward as well. And again, I go back to that Underoath key that I did. If I had an Interrupt, it would have been a lot smoother. So Resto Druid kind of let me down, especially in Mythic Plus environment. I just felt like I was a heal bot, I wasn't doing a lot of damage besides Sunfire and Moonfire. I'm not even sure why the Resto Druid community has not been vocal more about this, because for me, Resto Druid felt really, and I played every single healer, and this is coming from someone who mained Resto Druid for a really long time in the previous expansions. Resto Druid felt kinda awful. And again, I'm not talking about the organized groups that take barely any unnecessary damage or avoidable damage. We're talking about PuG groups in that 16, 17, 18 bracket, and that was the most painful experience. And that's probably because I'm so used to going into that cat form and trying to add DPS, and that is probably not really possible right now. But there's a huge caveat to this. Patch 10.17 is introducing Grove Guardians, which in my opinion is they're trying to target the exact problems that I experienced in Mythic Plus, and that is responding to avoidable damage, responding to something that you did not predict in terms of trying to provide additional single target healing through Grove Guardians, additional AoE healing through Wild Growth, because the Grove Guardians can cast Swift Med, Nourish, Wild Growth, they heal for you. So I have really high expectations. I am overdosing on copium right now, because I hope that Grove Guardians are going to fix at least some of the issues that Resto Druids have in Mythic Plus, because I really felt like it, I don't want to be too much of a downer, but I felt like Resto Druid probably was the least fun in Mythic Plus when pugging. But I don't want to digress too much, and I don't want to be too negative on Resto Druid because I have really high expectations for Grove Guardians. And let me know how you feel about the next patch in terms of what Blizzard is trying to fix, because I'm really excited. So that's why I'm gearing my Resto Druid. In terms of raid, it felt a little bit different because one of the most popular builds right now does not have reforestation. I've been playing my Resto Druid with reforestation in the previous patch and things like that for a long time, and I really got used to this talent. I really got used to using the Swiftmend and tracking the Swiftmend stacks and things like that in order to activate my, again, activate Tree of Life and then use Convokes, and that's kind of gone. Right now in raids as Resto Druid, you're really reliant on having a lot of haste, on pressing a lot of rejuves, and again, the talent soil is pretty much busted in terms of providing additional healing, and it created, I don't want to say it simplified Resto Druid, but actually that's exactly what it did. It simplified Resto Druid immensely because you don't really have to track your, again, you don't run reforestation, or at least a lot of people don't run reforestation. They're blanketing the raids with your rejuvenation ramps, they're using Convokes into flourishes, they make sure that Convoke is not proccing flourish, or if it does proc flourish, they're going to delay their real flourish later on, and with the tier set, flourish is extremely strong. So I do think the Resto Druid still has that rampy playstyle, but I think it's somewhat simplified from the previous patches. I'm not 100% sure how to feel about this. Again, we'll have to see how Grove Guardians is going to change this interaction, but I still enjoyed my Resto Druid in raids because the HPS is quite high, even if you have lower item levels. But keep in mind, guys, Resto Druid is probably the most susceptible healer to sniping. If you have other healers that can provide a lot of burst healing potential, especially every minute or minute and a half, you're probably going to have a pretty bad time as Resto Druid. But I was really surprised by Abundance and things like that, trying to build up a huge amount of stacks of rejuvenation or abundance stacks and then pressing regrowth once in a while, and that felt actually pretty interesting because it was a little bit different from my previous experience. So that's my Resto Druid summary. And now we go to Mistweaver Monk, and honestly this was the biggest surprise because I don't think I've had as much fun with a healer in a long time, or maybe not a long time, because I think Holy Paladin is extremely fun after the rework, and I think I had an immense fun with Holy Paladin. But I guess a lot of the times for me, differentiating fun and power can be difficult, because a lot of times being powerful is also being fun. Mistweaver Monk, again, I reached 420 item level or something along those lines. I was doing Mythic Plus, I was doing raids, I was again being helped by my stream, by friends in game to try and do some of the keys, and I was extremely, again, I said this at the start, extremely surprised about how Mistweaver felt, because Mistweaver feels like a different class in Mythic Plus and a completely different kind of gameplay in raids. It feels like you can have a pretty good balance in terms of trying to keep the class fresh, because again, in Mythic Plus you're running something like Ancient Teachings, Feline Stomp, Awaken Feline, and you're relying on hitting the mobs, and again, spin to win is a thing because your spinning Crane Kick feels powerful in terms of the amount of passive healing that it provides. Ancient Teachings feels powerful in terms of the amount of healing that it provides. You still have Rising Mist and things like that. So the playstyle in Mythic Plus, in terms of the passive amount of healing that you're providing from Awaken Feline, from Feline Stomp, from Ancient Teachings, from Rising Mist, and then on top of that, give yourself a, again, instant cast Vivifies with Vivacious Vivification, and all of a sudden the splash healing they provide, because if you have a lot of Renewing Mist out there, most of the time if there's not a lot of damage happening, you're pretty much covering the group with very little effort. It felt like night and day when compared to Resto Druid, where you're just, again, trying to keep rejuvenations on everyone, and you're kind of spending a lot of mana. And with Mistweaver Monk, you're just spinning to win in a lot of these trash back pulls, and you're just keeping the party alive by just providing DPS. Honestly, Mistweaver felt like it was a relatively fluid gameplay. I don't have a lot of haste in terms of optimizing a lot of my healers. Again, my Resto Druid, again, I feel like a lot of the healers here might feel a lot more fluid in Mythic Plus when I have more haste. So that's something to keep in mind. But man, Mistweaver felt really fun. I'm still kind of, how do I say, I played Holy Paladin, and Holy Paladin has that increase in terms of melee, in terms of having a larger range. I kind of missed out on Mistweaver because in certain situations being in melee felt a little awkward, and considering that a lot of your healing comes from being in melee, those moments when you can't hit mobs felt pretty scary. And again, Holy Paladin is a melee healer, but I actually don't think it relies on being in melee as much as something like Mistweaver Monk. But I was running that heavy melee build, and I had a freaking blast with Mistweaver. Even at low item levels, even doing these lower keys, I think the passive amount of healing was really fun. The only downside is that you really have to like that melee playstyle with the build that I was running. Now, again, if you're sick of this build, if you don't want to do Mythic Plus, I went to raids and I was pleasantly surprised to see this 1 minute Yulon clouded focused beast. This healer plays so weird in raid compared to Mythic Plus. And again, I played Mistweaver. I've actually mained the Mistweaver before in BFA. I mained it in raids and Mythic Plus. I was pushing a lot of Mythic Plus. And I have never experienced this gameplay before because you still have to stay in melee because you still have that Rising Mist and you still want to use your Rising Sun Kick to extend your HOTS. But when you're doing those ramps with Yulon, you're doing a bunch of hard casting and then you're using your Clouded Focus, you're shooting, misting someone and spamming Vivifies and things like that to provide insane amount of cleave. And then outside of those burst windows, you're trying to maintain as many renewing mists as possible. This created an almost, like, how to say, a hybrid class. You're someone that stays in melee because you're still using Rising Sun Kick, and again, you're still using or trying to get your mana back through Spirit of the Crane, but I'm not talking about Spirit of the Crane anymore because that's getting removed in 10.17, so you don't have to talk about this. This is going away. But this felt like a really hybrid class, something in between melee and something in between ranged, and initially I didn't know how to feel about this. I wasn't sure if it's fun, if it's interesting, but honestly, it has grown on me a lot, and I'm really loving this. I'm really loving this kind of healing playstyle of this 1 minute burst windows with your renewing mist and things like that. I genuinely really want to gear up my Mistweaver Monk a little bit more and try out again. I recently got the 4-set bonus, so my Vivify is healing for a lot more, and that felt a lot more powerful. But I really want to gear up my Mistweaver and see how far I can go because I'm enjoying Mistweaver a lot. Now, I don't want this video to be insanely long and things like that because it's already quite long. I rambled on too much. Let me know if you want to see part 2. I'm going to talk about Priest because Priest has 2 specs in terms of Discipline and Holy Priest, and I honestly had... I'll just leave it for part 2, guys. Let me know if you want this series to continue, and then I might cover my Preservation of Voker. I'll cover my other healers in terms of Holy Paladin, so in terms of Resto Shaman, and then do a bunch of videos comparing all the healers, comparing how fun they are in Mythic Plus, comparing how fun they are in raids, comparing, like, you know, what's the best healer for plus 20s and things like that. Just... I want to do a lot of these comparison videos. Let me know if you want to see part 2. Let me know if there's ways I could improve this format. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next video.